Hey, what's going on, everyone? I got a guest today, good friend, former client from a while back. We'll be talking about alcohol today, and we'll go from there. So let's give it a little bit. All right, guys. Traditional coffee. I've been trying this new brand. I actually meant to bring the bag. It's like Vita Cup. I forgot exactly, but it's a dark roast. It's like a USDA organic certified brand. I meant to bring it on the live today, but didn't happen. Kind of switching times a little bit today too. Usually do these on Friday, but today.
There
Hey,
we
what
are.
up, man? Long time no see.
He's here for you.
Oh, Yoda's in the house. You're getting me some star celebrity guests now, man.
You've been here, man. You've been in
Yeah,
the
yeah, Dilo. Usually I kind of do these on Fridays, so kind of like a new crew here. So we'll see who jumps on. But we'll be covering an important topic today. It's actually nothing like I'm crazy familiar with myself, so I'm gonna let you take over in a second. But as you know, I've been covering a lot of awareness about metabolic health, and how terrible it is currently in America. And I'm gonna kind of list off some stats here really quick, and in terms of how it goes into other health topics, and then you can kind of go over from there. But basically, you guys, I've been raising awareness because not that many people are aware that, uh, just the state of normalized mental and physical pathology in American culture these days. And the reason for that is it's because it's become so normal. It's all anyone sees that people stop questioning kind of like somewhat the insanity of it all. So just math is always math. So numbers are always going to be numbers. So let's kind of read off some basic statistics here. So currently, as of 2026, 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unwell. Um, 7 out of 10 are either overweight or obese. We have close to about 900,000 Americans dying from cardiovascular disease every single year. So 900,000, which is like a super crazy number. If you think about like losing those kind of numbers, like in the military, like everyone will be up in arms, like we need to stop the war, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, those similar numbers occurred um, in the lifespan of the whole entire COVID virus, and you saw how emotionally charged people became. But then when you hear these numbers and they've been occurring for already decades, it's like no one really takes action on it, you know what I mean? Like at all. And we have close to 650,000 Americans dying from cancer every year, 50% of whom, like 50% of Americans develop cancer in their lifetime, and half of them die from it. So between like heart disease and cancer, for example, if you go out with your friends, to a restaurant this weekend and there's you and three others sitting there, like one will die from cancer and one will die from like a heart attack. So you'll lose basically half of your friends to one of those two things. And 125,000 Americans die from strokes every year, 120,000 die from type 2 diabetes every year. 80% of Americans are on some kind of prescription medication for something. With, get this, if they're 65 and over, it's 90%. And the average 65-year-old is on four or more medical drugs. And I know these things kind of sound complicated, like metabolic health, heart disease, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like you're almost painted this picture of like it's inevitable with age. But in fact, these are like the ABCs of health and fitness. It's like imagine a person coming to you and they're like 40 years old and they've been living in America for 40 years and they don't understand, they don't know the alphabetical order. You mean? Like instantly you would think like, oh, there's something seriously wrong in this person's education. But this is how people view these like very, very basic health issues as like something very difficult to overcome. But in fact, they're like super easy. To at least be within the normal range of these markers. And um, and that's what makes it so much more disappointing because it's like, man, it's so easy to not end up this way, but yet almost all Americans are ending up this way. And and that's just with metabolic health, for example, or like cancer as well. Yeah, but then there are various other things like with alcohol, you have 180,000 Americans just dying from alcohol every year. And I actually looked into the stats and I was surprised to see that 120 of those 120,000 of that 180,000 actually die from long-term health consequences of drinking. I always thought it was like a car accident, or they stumbled on something and died that way. But that's only about like 60,000 of those deaths, which is still like a pretty crazy number if you think about it, because 60,000 Americans died in the entire Vietnam War, the entire 10-year Vietnam War. And that's like soldiers. And then you have, 180,000 Americans dying from alcoholism like every single year. And not only is this devastating to the individual, to the families of the individuals from these metabolic health and also alcohol, but it's also devastating to the economy. So to give you an idea, just with alcohol and just with heart disease, so heart disease costs the American taxpayer uh, $415 billion every year.
Wow.
And alcohol costs the American taxpayer $250 billion every year. So it's a combined $665 billion of taxpayer money that's lost dealing with just these two issues. And we haven't mentioned the various other drugs and the various other metabolic health issues. And just to give you an idea, with the war in Ukraine, over the 4 years, it's about like $40 billion of expenditure that was sent over there. But there's like a huge outcry about that. But again, it goes back to like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be spending all this money overseas, but hey, how about all this money we're losing currently at home just due to these very, very basic issues that basically um, everyone has personal volition over, you know what I mean? Sometimes you may need to get help, et cetera, to understand how to overcome it, but the power is yours, you don't have to kind of succumb to this. And I wanted to get your perspective on it because I know you drank alcohol before in the past, but it's been a very, very long time. And I actually don't even know your story. And I was curious about to get to know it and kind of like what's worked for you, what didn't work, all of the things you've tried, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for those stats. That's definitely eye-opening. It'd be interesting to hear the stat of how much the alcohol industry actually makes, per year. uh, God, yeah, I have a whole story and a whole background with alcohol, and I didn't even know it in the very beginning at childhood how that story was going to take place into my life. And what I mean by that is, when you're a kid, you're just a kid, and you see your parents, do certain things or not do certain things, and you don't really have a relevance or an understanding at the time of what any of that really means, other than the fact that, hey, mom or dad is, out in the driveway drinking a beer, mom's downstairs listening to the Rolling Stones, drinking a six pack, or, a whole iteration of just different people in your life as you're younger, and you're seeing them do this sort of thing. And it does inherently put like a almost like a perspective, like it's okay to do, right? And not necessarily like they were promoting that, as me as a child. It was like, I wasn't allowed to touch any of that stuff or do any of that, but it never really resonated with me just because of my growing up and some of the stuff that I saw, and some of the personality and characteristic traits that I saw adults have when they were, inebriated or intoxicated, or, you started seeing these different Jekyll and Hydes come out, right? And it's kind of awkward for a kid from when I can remember, being from, say, 8 years old until about 17, to, see these different things. I was like, I don't really like that. So, my alcohol story, believe it or not, where most stories start, I would have to venture to say would be, unfortunately nowadays, probably middle school, but, back in my day, it was high school, and everybody around me drank in high school. I may have like had a few drinks here or there in high school. I don't really remember. I think I remember like one night where I supposedly drank a whole bottle of tequila, and I think I did it just to kind of be cool. It was like that peer pressure thing, but I didn't like it. I didn't like any of it. It didn't resonate with me. I was the furthest thing. I was like Mr. Health and Fitness in high school. I was, doing the big lift club, and to earn the shirt and all that sort of thing. And so alcohol was never a part of me. On the wrestling team, I just didn't have, it just wasn't where I wanted to be at that point. And I was really scared of it, to tell you the truth. When I was very young, my grandmother, passed away on her couch due to alcoholism. She was
Hmm.
depressed. And I walked in with my dad at a very young age, and I saw my dead grandmother, on the couch. And you would think that would be something that, at that time would offend me, or drive me away from ever doing that sort of thing. But it didn't. Alcohol is a very powerful social tool. And, I forthcoming, people listening to this, they have an understanding. I own a company called Bar and Restaurant Insurance. So my job is to write insurance for establishments that serve alcohol to people that in a lot of cases, unfortunately, overdrink. What does overdrink really mean? I guess it's really dependent on your faculties and how end up leaving a situation from, say, a bar or a restaurant, something like that. And it can cause, accidents. It can cause deaths. Like you said, the 60,000, traffic deaths or however that, was. That's a lot, and I see a lot here in Arizona too. Anytime I get a claim on something, it's usually a alcoholic fatality, because I write insurance for the whole restaurant. I'll write, insurance for slip and fall, for fights, for food poisoning. And if you take 10 claims, I would say at least 5 to 6 of those are alcohol related. That's how
Hmm.
crazy it is, right? So when you dive back into my story, so high school really wasn't a thing. I didn't drink. Everybody around me was drinking. They were partying. It was kind of the thing to do, go to the lake, do that. So I was too scared. I was too nervous. Even college, I was like you. I was a hermit. I didn't do anything. I just studied, and I ended up getting an internship for Warner Brother Records. And as you can see on my wall over here, I got a lot of accolades for being in the music business and doing stuff. And I was very, very focused on that. I didn't want to lose my job. When I was touring with Van Halen or the Red Hot Chili Peppers, it was a really cool position to be in, and so I could actually control any sort of desires or any sort of need to be out of control. And I may have had a few drinks at dinner here or there during that time, but it wasn't anything like what happened after I got out of the music business, of all things, right? You would think crazy party, that sort of thing. That was some of the hardest work I ever did, because I was trying to prove myself. I didn't want to be a letdown for anybody involved, not just the rock stars, but for the record labels and the people that entrusted me as a young kid to go out and do that sort of thing. So it wasn't until I got into the lifestyle and the culture of sales. Okay. And I don't care if it's, and I know all of these people and all these different mechanisms. I don't care if it's insurance, mortgage brokers, bankers, you name it. That whole culture in America today, specifically, I can only speak for that because that's where I live. It's just all about drinking and making the next business deal, whether it be on the golf course with beers, whether it be at happy hour with a cocktail, late nights. That started happening to me. So once I got into insurance sales, that's where the alcohol, let's just say, the issue started becoming. I got into the hospitality aspect of insurance, and through that, I got to meet a lot of people in hospitality. And the thing to do was to drink. It was always to drink. Now, it seems ridiculous, probably for some people, where it's like, yeah, well, can't you just have a drink or two and just cut it off? And I do get that, that, like, my wife, she might have like half a drink and she's good for like a month, right? That to me is like, that's a Jedi mind trick. That's a talent, right? Only Yoda possesses that, and my wife. But for somebody like myself, that was of no interest. Like, if I'm going to go out, we're going to go out and we're going to do it right, and the drug that is alcohol, in whatever form, wine, spirit, beer, whatever it is, for some people like myself, that I can fully acknowledge now, it creates a mechanism within inside you that allows you, or you think it allows you, to become above and greater than yourself. Like, you're just like, for me, it was game on. There was no stopping me. There was no filter. There was no nothing. It wasn't to say that I was, a complete, jerk all the time or anything like that, but I was definitely over the top. I was the life of the party, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, right? It got me a lot of business, maybe not the alcohol itself, but the fact that I was hanging out with people in the business,
Hmm.
and so that mechanism just, year after year seemed to work. I was growing my business. I was still present. I was still doing things. But then there just comes a time and a pivot point where it starts, you talk about what, 180,000, 60,000 from car accidents, the other 120 from, health. It starts coming about health. And when you get into your, mid 30s, early 40s, there's not much, recuperation or recovery for that sort of thing. And so, to go out and, have a couple beers, even, if I wanted to, or if I could still, at 52 now, I was just thinking about this before I got on the phone with you. I met you when I was 48. I can't believe how fast time flies.
Oh,
And
really? I thought it was like just 2 years ago.
no, dude, I was 40.
Really?
Yeah, because I
Ah,
did my first show at 49, or not my first. I did my other show at 49, and that was with you, and then 50, and then you came out for the book signing, and I was fat back then, well, that's why I came to you because I was
or
chubby.
bulking.
I was bulking, right?
Yeah,
But
you got to reframe it that in
yeah,
a positive way,
but
You set the foundation to our success together,
well,
through years of bulking.
100%. But I started getting very like unhealthy. I couldn't sleep well. I was inflamed constantly. Everything ached. And I'm a 37, 38-year-old man that should be like, like optimal. My testosterone, because I do get blood tests, bi-yearly, just because I enjoy to know where my numbers are at. My testosterone was down in the 200s. I mean, I was literally clinically depressed, even though I'm not a depressed person, and I still just pushed through, and I built a very successful business, and I was able to do all the things, but I didn't know how much I was missing by not doing alcohol, right? And once I shut that door on it, which was 12 years ago, June 11th, once I shut that door and I made that decision, for me it wasn't hard. I just said one day, you know what, I'm done. And my life had changed too. I'd gotten recently married. I established having two new kids in my life, and I knew at 40 years old it was a make it or break it for me with my career. Next 10 years was going to be something that I wanted to wake up early. I wanted to be, focused. I wanted to move better. I didn't want to feel as bad. And albeit I wasn't, completely shredded right away, because I did love chips and cookies still. I think that mechanism of those things were needed for me to even kind of shy off the alcohol. It's kind of weird how the alcohol can have an adverse effect on the way that you eat and the things that you consume, at least in my case. And it took me years to even get off of sugar. I still love sugar to this day, but I can how do I say, I can reserve the need to have to eat it all the time or do those things, because now I know how my body operates, how it works. I've always got a clear picture of that sort of thing. And so, you know, like alcohol is just, it's so funny because I make so much money off of protecting establishments from drunk drivers, right? And so it seems like such a hypocritical thing to talk, just to talk garbage about a substance that, obviously makes, helps me make a career. But I have no issue talking, like it could go away tomorrow and I'd be fine with it, because I just don't see any benefit in it at all for myself. Now, some people will say, well, it helps me relax. Okay, well, so does sleeping, and so does, reading a good book, maybe, or so does meditating. Or I just think there's a lot of other mechanisms that you can do
hmm
and put into your life that has nothing to do with alcohol, right? I don't, and I've never done a drug in my life except for the alcohol. I did smoke some weed at one time, and I just, whoa, that did not work. That just made me feel disgustingly like paranoid on everything.
You can't buy the weed from the Jawas.
No, you can't stop, right?
That's it's always sold at discount, but the price comes in other ways.
Yeah, no, it really does. And here we are, 12, looking back 12 years, and I don't even think about it anymore. Like sometimes I'll walk into a restaurant and we may be, close to the bar. Maybe we sit at the bar to have our food because it's crowded. And that smell, it just makes me want to vomit at this point. It smells like poison. And it literally is, to me, it was just poison, just decimating my system. And, yeah, I haven't looked back. It's been quite a journey, quite honestly.
Yeah, I always, I never, the days when I was going to raves here and there at UCI, when I was still in UC Irvine, I would do like a little bit of Kettle One and Red
Mhm.
Bull. And
Yeah.
because it was so infrequent, I would just need just a little teeny bit, and then it would give you energy like all night and everything. But always like that smell, that's what always got me too. For some reason, like I never got into alcohol because I always like thought it smelled like a hospital.
Yeah.
Like how did they desensitize or put alcohol on everything to freaking kill the germs? And it kind of smelled exactly like that. And for some reason in my mind's eye, I would always see like bloody bandages or like sick people, and I'm like, ah, that's like so gross. And then the few times I would drink, you would wake up and you would feel like not that great and stuff of that sort. And yeah, I mean, with alcohol, like the thing goes, it's like it always ends poorly. It just depends on how poorly it's going to end for the person that's drinking, you know?
Yeah, and to your point, even on the, okay, so first of all, bad sleep is just that's the number one worst thing that you can do for yourself. When your body is waking up in the course of the night, you're not getting full rest, you can't work out, you can't be, have the mindset or the things that you want to do and, family, business, all that sort of stuff. And so wasting hours and wasting days was just not going to work for me anymore. I do know that my physical ability to be on this earth is getting shorter and shorter every day, and every day is obviously the ultimate blessing. And so when you understand that and acknowledge that and you see your own vulnerability, the last thing I want to do is wake up on a Saturday morning, and like this morning I woke up at 3:30. No problem, that's what time I normally get up. I go to bed at 8. um that you'll text me late sometimes and be like, you're not going to get this till later, but like that to me is one of the biggest rewards I got from quitting alcohol. Is I got more quality time to live my life, because before I would get drunk and maybe pass out at 3:30 and then not wake up until 10 or 11. And then the problem is when you do wake up, your body, your mind, everything is just not there. You don't want to do anything, so you just end up wasting a whole 24 hours. And that just, that wasn't a thing. And I know that's not everybody's issue. I get that, but I really do. Even people that I talk to that have never quote unquote had an alcohol issue and don't drink that much, they still limit themselves to like 2 drinks because they know after that, when you're 40 and above, it's just it's a chemical and it's just going to do that to your body, just like any other, creatine or anything else that you're going to take. You just kind of know what is going to happen based on what happens all the time to people.
Yeah. I found too, this is people that drink obviously way more frequently than like 2 drinks a week or something of that sort. But I found like people that have issues with alcohol or excessive alcohol consumption, when you actually like talk to them and get to know them, you'll find that they're actually like very passionate people.
Hmm.
Ironically, they're actually very like excited for life, and they get very excited to talk about things. But I also found like people that especially drink excessively, they're just not too excited about their life. You know what I mean? The huge story gap disconnect between a kind of what they want their life or what they saw their life to be and what their life actually is. And I found this kind of like alcohol was used almost as kind of like a dissociation, like the ability to buy like a little bit of time and break from having to kind of come to the realization like, hey, this is not how I wanted my life to be, but I'm still so passionate about life. But this is just not the life I'm having now. You know what I mean? That's the dilemma.
It's a distraction, alcohol doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if you're a passionate person, doesn't care if you're a depressed person, doesn't care if, it doesn't care about any of that stuff, right? So I think every individual that partakes in that has to take inventory with inside themselves. They have to audit who they are as a person. For me, like that resonates with what you just said. I'm one of the most passionate people there is. I mean, this is me without alcohol. Put me on alcohol and you can 10x this shit, right? It's not good for a lot of people. For me, it was great. But that, it wasn't a depression thing necessarily. Maybe at times it would be an escapism thing. I think there's a lot of escapism in alcohol. You hear it all the time, like the Scottsdale, wine moms just want to, oh, I've had such a rough day, with my kids or this and that, and they go out and maybe with all intentions to have a glass of wine, hang out with their friends, and then it turns into, a couple bottles, and then they're getting a DUI on the way home, and it's really easy to just kind of be in the moment and let it flow. And and for me to be like, okay, I'm going to pull back after 1 drink, I realized that just wasn't going to be an option for me, so it was just better to completely quit.
Yeah. Well, what about your business, having to go out and socialize often? I train a bunch of business guys, and it's one of the challenges, especially in the sales. You got to go out to these dinners, and it's like you're trying to sell this guy on like some $1 million deal, and you're going to say, no, I'm going to stick to my water and ice, kind of like,
Bro, it hasn't affected me one bit. If you are that secure with yourself as a person, and at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't want to do business with you because you don't drink, I've heard it before. Oh, I wouldn't do business with a man, that doesn't drink. Yeah, well, cool, dude. I don't need to do business with you either. I mean, that is definitely a psychology that will come into play with people, and when they hit those business and those social settings, it can be difficult for them. And at first it was a little bit difficult for me, not because I wanted to drink, but just because it was all around me and I didn't want to be around it. Right. Once I had put that into a caption of "this is poison, I don't want to do this," it was no problem. I love being there. I love being the most clear-minded, focused person, and I loved ordering a sparkling water. It's like it's no big deal. You're just sitting there with the same glass with a different substance in it. And so I think the minute that people can, including myself, the minute that you can not be so insecure about the substance that's in your hand and know that it's actually a superpower, because most people cannot do that. It's kind of like when there's a basket of chips on the table and you're trying to watch, you try to watch your weight. It's very difficult for a lot of people to not grab in and, grab a few of those chips, let alone a couple, right? It's the same thing with alcohol, in my opinion.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, even if it's not your business to go out and sell clients on things, just a lot of people drink recreationally, like you mentioned, those housewives, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like it's very expensive too. If you add up like eating out or like alcohol consumption, I mean, the average American is spending, just on non-essential expenses like $8,000 to $16,000 per year.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people that's quite a bit of money. If they're making like 70,000 a year and they're spending 8 to 16,000 of that on just alcohol and eating out, and then you count taxes, it's like, dude, you're like, after those two things, you're pretty much like not left with that much money for the whole entire year.
Did they not read your book, huh? Your new book
Well,
that you
not yet. I even made it $5, to be able to be afforded by everyone so they can save so much money.
know? And Mark, to answer your question, I mean, the constant hangovers were the worst part of the alcoholism. It wasn't necessarily the drinking, but like I would say the hangovers and like the the aftermath of my health was the worst. And then when I started realizing I was still working out. Like I was running, I was beating my body running, thinking I could outrun, what the effect booze would do on my system, right? And then the booze, like you said, allows you to make those really bad food choices, right? Because that's what you're craving. You're craving Jack in a Box through the drive-through before you go home, the really greasy tacos or the cheese sticks because you've had about, 15 beers at the local Irish bar. And then you eat all that and then you go to bed and then you wake up and you think you're going to go run 6 miles or you're going to run that off. Not happening. None of it was. You could never outrun a bad hangover, let alone a bad diet. And so that to me was just like the worst part about it. I mean, waking up with a hangover. And the thing is like when you wake up with a hangover and a headache, what do you want to do? You want to go back to the bar and go get the buzz on again, because that's one of the only things that can make it go away. But truth be told, even if there was a solution, like a pill you could take the next morning that just got rid of the hangover so you could go back out and drink, I still would not, partake or do it because of the health consequences, overall of what it does to your system.
Well, what are some things you see people constantly do wrong on their journey to stop using alcohol?
It's a good question. I think they put a I think they put a timeline on it. I think they put an expectation on it that they know is unachievable, because maybe in their mind they want to not do it anymore or do it less, but they know that they're just going to go and do it. And look, I quit like twice before I quit, if that makes any sense. I mean, there were stints that I didn't drink for a year, or you see these dry Januaries and those, things like that, and you would partake in that for a month or two, and I'd be like, you know, um, yeah, when they say you're going to, yeah, there's no such thing as cutting back. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's and I think that's the hardest thing for people to kind of put into perspective. It's kind of like breaking up with like that chick that keeps abusing you. That's all alcohol does, is abuse you, or the dude that abuses you. Like, if you keep going back, it's because you can't, make that decision to fully get away from it. So it wasn't until 12 years ago where I was like, this is completely it. I'm not doing this anymore. It wasn't until then that I knew that that was, the bottom line decision I had to make. I couldn't be around it for a while, and I couldn't even partake one drink. There was a time where I quit for a year, and then we were opening up a new restaurant in California. And my business partner was like, look, dude, I know you don't drink, but, come on, we're celebrating. We're opening up the restaurant. Here's a, he gave me this little, I don't know, $100 glass of bourbon or some stuff like that. I remember the night, and he's like, just sip on it. You're not going to get drunk. It's not like, and dude, it was that one thing that allowed it inside of my brain to say, you know what, this isn't bad. And so I would do that, maybe a week at a time. And then all of a sudden it was just kind of like, I'm just going to have a couple beers tonight and kind of do that sort of thing. And so it was just, it didn't work. Oh, my relationship, like, hasn't like, it's a good question, but I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly. My relationships, as far as like the people I was involved with and the drinking and all that. I mean, if that's the case, it was like my relationships. It's funny that it's funny. You look back on the people that I dated or who I was with. A lot of those relationships stemmed around alcohol, right?
Hmm.
Like, it was always going out, it was drinking, it was partying. She would drink, I would drink. We would come back, we would be drunk, we would do our thing. We'd eat like crap. Yeah. What's so great about where I'm at now in life is when I met my wife, she wasn't a drinker. She still isn't. Again, she's one of these robots that can have half a glass of wine. She'll literally order a whole glass of wine at dinner, maybe once every 2 months, and she'll drink half of it. And she's like, ugh. And I'm just like, cool. But point being is that when we first started dating, that wasn't her thing. And it was really the antithesis for me to go, I love this woman. I'm going to marry her. She's not really into it. I don't need to be into it anymore. So that's one of the strongest things I can tell you, that if you're in a relationship that is really based around alcohol, I really do believe it's going to be tough to get out of that, and
Hmm.
that relationship or that person parlays away from it. I'm not saying that it's impossible that you can't be with somebody, but it just doesn't resonate at that point. It's kind of like, if you, all, I mean, I'd say it's even worse than if you're like a full-on meat eater and your partner's vegan. At least you can, kind of, it's not affecting the psychology of, how you're waking up and what you're doing and how you're treating each other. That's different. But alcohol is a whole other thing. It really is a drug, and if both people are on it, then that's kind of the relationship you end up having. A lot of your social activities, all the things that you want to do, the people that you hang out with, all revolves around that. And that's another important point to realize too. When I quit alcohol, I lost a lot of relationships. Okay. Not because I did anything wrong or they did anything wrong. Or you really start to see like how your relationships were, how they were, put together. And it was based on going out to the St. Patrick's Day party, or going out every Friday night to this place and bellying up to the bar and being the laughing stock of everybody. And, we have groups of people that we used to go to dinner with, and they would just order bottles of wine after bottle of wine after bottle of wine, and we'd have an expensive steak dinner. And my wife and I would feel we would feel very obligated to stay there for 3 hours when we were done after an hour and a half, right? And everybody's getting drunk, and you're listening to the same story of the same and it's just not fun when you're sober to be around people that are drunk. Just it just isn't. And then I could see myself as that person. I could only imagine, some of the people and, what I had, how I was portrayed to them through the lens of alcohol. And now how I'm able to portray myself in an honest, authentic, and true way, because I will never need to give an apology unless I'm just, unless I said something really stupid. But it wasn't because of alcohol. It wasn't because of a drug. So those are good questions.
Yeah, I found this is the case with everything, but I found especially with fat loss clients and the reoccurrence or the relapse of fat gain,
Mm.
it's pretty much happens in like 98% of cases. Like Americans that lose any amount of weight, and they're a huge percentage that don't even lose any weight, but for the percentage that does lose weight, if you do typically like a 2 or 3 year follow-up, they've regained all their weight. And one of the biggest culprits is they just kind of stick around. It's not like their friends are bad friends. It's just they're not conducive to maintaining a leaner body. Like a lot of their friends would go to Disneyland and they just eat a bunch of junk food there or go out often. And of course, if a person is trying to maintain a lean physique, there are no absolutes. Maybe one out of every 100 has that discipline to sit at that table and just order like a steak, and not eat literally anything else. But it's very far in between, and not many people have that kind of natural stoic kind of psychology to be able to do that, or just that awareness around their, that clarity around their core values and what's critically important to them. And like you said, it happens very slowly. You cheat one time and then you're like, it's no big deal. Then 2 weeks go by, you're like two cheats. It's no big deal. Like maybe 3 months go by, now you're cheating 3 times a week. And that's how your central nervous system works. It habituates and creates a new normal, even if it's abnormal. And that's all you know. And then it kind of like one thing after another. And you fast forward 3 years and you've regained your 30 pounds of excess weight that you already lost with a coach or on your own like 3 years ago. And then you got to do it all over again and again and again. And it's because they stay in the same exact environments around the same friends, the same family, et cetera, et cetera.
So that's exactly what happened to me. This is true fact based on your story. I'm 36 years old. I had a goal to do my first NPC fitness show, right? My dad had, is a bodybuilder and I wanted to do one. And I was, kind of chubby. I was doing my drinking, all that sort of thing, bulking up. And I went and I got a coach, and she was also my drinking buddy, right? But we had made a commitment for 9 months to get me shredded. So I didn't drink. I'm type A, so anything that I decide to put my mind to, usually I'll just go and I'll accomplish it, including drinking a lot, right? But to your point, I did the 9 months. I ended up getting I think third in the fitness show. I mean, I crushed it at 36 years old. I look great. Dude, I'm 145 pounds, right? I'm just completely shredded. And I ended up still hanging out with the same friends that I had had before, right? Nothing had really changed other than I had a goal. I accomplished that goal. And then I just went right back to my old life thinking that, well, cool, I'm in shape now. I can handle this. I can have a few beers here or there. And then, as you know, and you see all the time through your coaching, all this stuff seems to catch up after a while. And you don't notice it in the immediate because you're kind of like, for me, I was like, oh, dude, I'm completely shredded. I'm going to go have the big cheat meal, and now I can have it again because I'm still this and that. And you continue to work out and do those things, but you're not as strict and you're kind of adding these little things here or there. And then here you are 8 months later, and I go from like 145 pounds to, 170. And I'm like, how did that happen? Because my Friday nights are a lot different than they were before. So I made a commitment to do a fitness show to get in shape, but I didn't make any commitments to continue on with that or to get rid of my, my old habits. The old habits were still there. They were just put on hold for a while. So it wasn't until I made that commitment to say, I'm never picking up a drink again, when I was 40, that's when it happened.
Well, was it tough? Did you have a tough time letting some friends go? As you mentioned, you kind of shuffled around a lot of close acquaintances and friends.
No, because it wasn't like it was like, anybody did anything to anybody else to make you feel bad, right? So when you know that you're doing something good for yourself And it's not like any of my friends were like, oh, he's a, some of them were like, what, are you too good for us now? You kind of get through all that or whatever. And that's kind of, in my opinion, it's just kind of bullshit and bullshit thing to say. But when they kind of get over the
You should
what,
have been like, hey man, leg day is always on Tuesday and Friday. You're welcome to join anytime.
yeah, once they kind of get over all that and then they realize that you're doing well and you're not doing it to kind of outshine them or anything like that, I didn't really lose them as people in my life, entirely. I just lost them as people. I lost being in their lives because when they were doing that sort of stuff. So I'll give you like an example. The lady that had trained me, she was like my drinking buddy. We were both single. We'd go out drink. She was my trainer. I'd help her go find dudes and whatever. We had a lot of fun together, and it was all revolved around drinking. And then once I met my wife, obviously that all stopped because I wanted to be with my wife. And but I also wanted to quit drinking. I wanted to do something different. And so I hadn't talked to this person except see her on Facebook every once in a while. And I just went to her 50th birthday, right? And it was like we didn't lose any time. So it's kind of your relationship just changes it, and it's not just alcohol. It's obviously if you find like, a spouse and you're going to be a part of their life and other things. I think it's a whole, concept of different things that help you change your life as you go. But I can always, any of those people, if they were to call me and they would need something, I would absolutely help them and do something, because the friendship was deeper than alcohol. But unfortunately, the socialization was about alcohol, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, Walensky, one of my favorite authors, he always mentions like honest change can never happen until we stop believing the lies like we tell ourselves. Do you remember like some of the lies you would tell yourself to kind of make it okay to keep drinking and doing all that stuff?
Yeah, that it wasn't that big of a deal, that I could handle it, that I'll just work out tomorrow and work this beer off, or and I realized that it was just a bunch of lies to kind of, basically be like, or hey, I'm fine. I can drive now. I can do whatever. Those are just lies to just kind of tell myself that I wasn't ready to stop doing it. I wasn't ready to stop living the lifestyle that I had. And, I mean, looking back on that, I can see all that and I realize it, and it's okay.
Yeah. Well, Dilo, last question is how are your self-care practices now? How have you been doing since we've coached together? Maybe already it's already been like a year or two at this point.
Yeah. So, everything that, dude, I did some heavy lifting today. I did some good stuff, some push pull, like, plate. I had a 45-pound plate, dangling while I'm doing pull ups and dips, and oh, it's good stuff.
Functional training for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Sure.
kidding.
You know, here, here's the thing. Core values, the one of the many things that you had taught me. I still look at my core values. I adjust. I maintain. I live by those, daily. Those are very important. The daily practice of just, rest and breath, and realizing that the stress of, work and all that just isn't worth it. Now, I might be in a different situation than a lot of people. I'm very fortunate to have built a very successful business that that quite honestly I'm selling right now, and I'll never have to work again. But the fact of the matter is I love to work, right? So now it just takes like a different constitution of being free and being able to just help people, not because I need to for, financially, but because I want to. And I always wanted to, but it just takes on a different meaning. So you always talk about the things that you always coach me about was getting rid of that stress, right? And that has just been a game changer. And at 52 years old, I've never felt better in my life. But mobility wise, rest wise, how I eat, am I counting macros to the T, and doing all that stuff? Sometimes when I feel like I need to have a pullback, maybe I will. But it's great because I know how to do that and I know what's going on. But also there's going to be times where my wife's like, right now she's texting me like, hey, what are we doing for lunch? We have no food. Cool, let's just go to this healthy marketplace down here, and maybe I'll have a little extra sweet potato and not worry about it. So that
You
and
should have been like, we're gonna fast the rest of the day.
right, but
Just
see,
kidding.
That's stressful.
Kim's gonna block me on Facebook, but that's okay. You know?
But that goes to the point of that being that's stressful for me, right? I worked out hard. I need to eat. I know that, and so not taking things over the top so serious anymore, and just really relaxing and taking that time to do the things that I love, and that's being with my family, my dogs, playing guitar, doing some meditation, going back into my childhood and all that sort of stuff, and just moving the body. So those are my daily practices, really.
Yeah. Well, Dilo, is there anything else you would like to cover before we close it out? Happy to go in any direction.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's, listening now or later or anything, and they want to friend me on Facebook, and they're going through anything, as far as alcohol goes, and or anything else, and they just want to chat, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to share my experience. I'm not here to judge or tell you what to do or how to do it. I'm just here to share a story, and if that helps you, great. If this has helped you, awesome. There's no judgment. I mean, I am probably, back in the day was one of the biggest maniacs that could have ever been here. And I'm just, I'm very fortunate, and I'm glad to be alive, quite honestly. That's how big of a maniac I was. And I really was able to turn my life around and stay focused and true to, health, wellness, fitness, and all that. And that's why I found you and a lot of other great, people in my lives that helped me with that stuff. So I thank you for the platform and the opportunity to be able to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's good to hear a story. For s- for sure, I thought this alcohol thing picked up during your music days, but I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I'm surprised it actually picked up during the restaurant business, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay. Well, Dilo, we stay in touch anyways, but it's good to see you. It's been a while since I've seen you. And thanks for everyone that showed up. Wishing everyone a good weekend, okay?
Yeah. Happy Saturday, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.